Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war update, walk through the front lines, look at the maps, have a see what is going on. Won't be too long today because I did a live last night that was pretty lengthy. Not a massive amount of information out there, a few sort of nuggets here and there. Here's the main map of Ukraine. We're going to be starting in our northeast section in the Kupiansk down to Svatove and then to Kreminna area. But before that, overnight, what's happened? Well, air defense has had a good night and morning from Ukraine's point of view. In Kyiv, 6 killer drones were downed, while in Odessa, defense forces managed to stop 3 Kh-59 cruise missiles fired from Su-30 aircraft. Recent Western donations are having a big effect now, says Tim White. So it looks like there are better and more surface-to-air missile capabilities and other ways of shooting down these armaments, such as the Gepard. And I'll be doing a little bit on the Gepard in the Ukraine War Update Extra later. Certainly seem to be used. And in fact, there is a claim that a cruise missile, at least one, has been shot down by Gepards with the autocannons on board, which is pretty impressive. So another really bad day for the Russian forces in terms of numbers that they've lost, liquidated personnel, as according to the Ukrainian MODs. The 800 is a massive number, and it's just completely unsustainable. You put that together with, I think, 650 yesterday, 950 the day before. You know, these are huge numbers. The amount of armored personnel vehicles, 24, tanks, 16. These are really, really unsustainable figures coming from the Russians. I'd obviously like to see more artillery systems and rocket launch systems from a Ukrainian point of view taken out, but they have still lost a few. And UAVs, 23 UAVs. So this is pretty tough reading for pro-Russians. Interesting from the grain point of view, the Russians hit a couple of tugs, which have really caused a few problems going forward. I'll just read a little bit from the Institute for the Study of War. So, Luhansk People's Republic Deputy Interior Minister Vitaly Kizelyov claimed that the recent Russian strikes against Ukrainian military infrastructure in Ochakiv, Mykolaiv Oblast sank 2 harbour tugs. A Russian source claimed that Ukrainian forces continue preparations for a Russian offensive west of Hlyapole in Zaporizhia Oblast. So Russian forces have likely increased their sabotage efforts in unoccupied southern Ukraine to further impede Ukrainian participation in the grain deal following the Russian pullout from the deal. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command reported on November the 1st that Russian saboteurs are active in southern Ukraine. Southern Operational Command reported that Ukrainian authorities arrested an Odessa city law enforcement officer associated with Russian intelligence, and there's a video of that online. Russian intelligence services who collected data on Ukrainian military equipment transport and planned to blow up a railway. Successful Russian interdiction of Ukrainian logistics lines in southern Ukraine could impede Ukraine's ability to transport grain to neutral ports for international shipment, so on and so forth. And in fact, the ISW is now doing an awful lot of behind the scenes supporting effort Southern Axis. So look at all the text they have here concerning stuff to do with partisan activity, stuff to do with other movements that aren't directly on these front lines that they report on, as you can see above. So lots of information from the ISW at the moment pertaining to the conflict. Okay, let's go to the front lines. I'm going to take you to this northeastern section from Kupiansk down to Svatove and Kreminna, and I must pronounce Svatove correctly. Goodness me, get it right. Okay, so there is around the Kupiansk area, to the east of there is fighting in Pershotravneve, towards Orliansky, in and around Avdivka, Kislivska, fighting pretty much everywhere. And first time we've heard fighting in and around Pershotravneve for a few days, for some time. I did see footage, pretty shocking footage of a Ukrainian BMP in going towards Orliansky, or Orlianka, I think, as the Russians call it, and a BMP with infantry fighting vehicle with a bunch of troops walking behind a massive mine explosion that took it out and took out almost all the troops by the looks of it. So, the point of me saying that is there's huge amounts of human life being lost on both sides here. The Ukrainians will be losing a lot of equipment and lives in an offensive. It's just the nature of the beast, and they are putting on in big offensives all over the shop in this area. So expect there to be heavy losses. A lot of talk really about Kuzymivka. And I talked about this last night. The Ukrainians have taken Novoselivsky, and that is only literally meters away from Kuzymivka. Kuzymivka seems to be quite a key town for control of this road coming down here that then leads into Svatove. There is a rumor from the Ukrainian or from somewhere that the Ukrainians are in and around Honcharivka. This would be pretty amazing if that's the case. It could just be a scouting party that's out there. I'm not 100% sure that's reliable information. So here we have that comes later. So here we have the one of the claims. So Ukrainians has moved towards Kolomichika after crossing the Kherson. So just to let you know, this is this settlement here. So there's been fighting in around Stelemivka still, apparently, but they've moved. The Ukrainians seem to be confirmed around here. But then there is this claim of Honcharivka. There are rumors that the AFU, the Ukrainian forces, have reached Honcharivka. And pro-Russians, as I said last night, are pretty negative about Svatove. Is not looking good in that direction. Someone says, love the Honcharivka rumor. It's well within reach, but presumably heavily defended, and if reached, probably only by scouting patrol. It's too critical to Svatove's defence, supply, and escape not to be strongly fought over, while Svatove holds and trigger Svatove abandonment once taken. So, what this idea is that it's unlikely you're going to have Ukrainian forces there. That would start triggering stuff going on in Svatove, and there's too much fighting to be done. I mean, I know this only looks like fields, but this will be really heavily contested, this area. So there you go. So that's what's happening there. Not a lot of news really in the Ryarodka area and further down the Kherson River down towards Makivka. There is claims about fighting in around Makivka. It's unknown where the Ukrainians have breached the P-66. Some thoughts were it's in Ploshchanka, could be further down south in Chervonopopivka or further up north. And how much control and whether that's sustained is hard to say. I'd say impossible at the moment. The P-66 certainly has the Ukrainians will have some kind of fire control over this road, so it's not going to be the most useful supply route from Svatove to Kreminna. There is a lot of talk about Chervonopopivka having activity literally, there, not just towards it. I think there's fighting on the outskirts and talk about, moves towards Zhitlivka as well. That's the latest I can get as far as I've moved my line slightly there. If we come further down south, there are claims going on. So there were claims that in the Kharkiv area that a Russian helicopter has been shot down. Not quite sure exactly what type of helicopter. And then Russians claim to have shot Mi-8 down around Zarichny. All the usual sort of thing. There will be the attrition of those kind of pieces all the time, as you can well imagine. Dubrova seems to be, not a lot of news coming out of there, so I've kept that as Ukrainian for the time being. But Bilohorivka is a bit of an issue, as in there's a lot of pressure from a couple of flanks on Bilohorivka. It's quite key because obviously it's so close to Lysychansk, but also key to accessing this forested area. And it seems like the Russians are now fighting on the outskirts of Bilohorivka and have some parts of the eastern, certainly some buildings in the eastern side of Bilohorivka, so it is becoming contested. That's a bit of troubling news going forward, but unsurprising for the Ukrainians. Okay, if we move further down, I think Spirina is there's some activity around Spirina as well. If we move further down, we come to Bakhmut, and same old, same old. That there's fighting going on around Soledar and Bakhmutsky, and then further down south. But really, the Ukrainians seem to be fairly solid at the moment. But we shall see how that develops. I changed my maps the other day to say there's some movements of the Russian forces around this Kurdyumivka. And across this road, I'll see if that's anything's happened there today. Let's move further down south. So not really huge amounts of news from Bakhmut, but yes, I have changed my lines to be slightly more accurate around. So this is Donetsk, just to let you know where we are. So we have moved down the whole front line from really Kharkiv down the Luhansk and into the Donetsk Oblast, and a front line past Bakhmut to Donetsk city and Avdivka, that is holding out just to the west. So here we have Avdivka. There is attempts further up north, Kamyank going up here for the Russians to get around, but no news coming from around here at all. There is, as I say, I've improved my lines and made them a little bit more accurate around Vodyane. So Vodyane is pretty much 50-50 split, maybe a little more for the Russians. I don't know exactly, but this is being heavily contested at the moment, and this is key because if they get Vodyane, then they can actually encircle around here and attack Pervomaisky, which are having such trouble with moving through Pervomaisky. But if they can flank it, then they'll obviously have two areas to attack it, and that will be pretty important. So it might be a case of moving out here and taking these settlements before then concentrating on Avdivka, sort of shutting out all the routes of escape from Avdivka, or at least leaving only this one up here. That looks to be what's happening, but it's very slow. And the Russians are not making it. It's not easy for them. So this is a great example of geolocation. Okay, you've got 4 Russian BMPs destroyed here. Let's see if I have the where is that? So here it is. So this comes from basically from a video that I think I showed you the other day. 4 Russian BMP infantry fighting vehicles was destroyed in rapid succession by Ukrainian Stugna P anti-tank guided missiles in Oblast. This is from, I think, the Amiga group, which is kind of, I think, pretty special forces or pretty elite. And they took out these 4 BMPs, which was pretty devastating for the Russians. And then this is genius of geolocation. So here you have pretty strong evidence of vehicles at the start ride west-southwest of Opitny, north of Donetsk airport, at exactly this point. So if you then go on this, so what happens is this is a video, and you get all these markers. So that blue bit is this blue bit. There's a gap in the trees, and here are all these different markers there. So you come down here and there's a gap in the trees. There are all these markers, and so therefore this took place exactly there. And I've geolocated it to these longitude and latitude, and here it is on a map. So so this is what this person has done, and they've geolocated. Oops, I've just got rid of it by closing that down. They geolocate it to an exact position. So there you go. It's that position there where you have Opitny and Vodyane there. So then I can put it on my map and say that's exactly where those BMPs were destroyed. There's that curly little bit of, I don't know, pathway there. So we know that there are Russians driving up here and getting blown up. In other words, this is a little bit of a grey zone there. Munitions have been hit, fired and hitting equipment here. So Anyway, that's just an example of how geolocation works and how useful it is for people creating maps, because you can understand, what's going on exactly where. Okay, we're going to come down south from there. So really only meters changing hands, but I have moved some stuff around Vodiane and Opitny to reflect a greater accuracy of the maps. And further down here, so Marinka, there's quite a lot of fighting going on. I've improved my maps from Marinka. So what I've done is reflected where the Russians are at the moment, and there are some settlements. There's some sort of farming settlements just here. There's a boarding school here, which the Ukrainians were using. Now the Russians have control over that. It's quite a sort of extensive bit of building there. So now I've left my Ukrainian lines to show where the Russians have advanced in Marinka, and I'll bring back my Ukrainian lines a bit further there. But just to show you a greater accuracy, it's partly accuracy, partly advances Russians have made in Marinka. So that is again a bit of a worry for the Ukrainians. Now, this is going down to Vuhledar and Avdivka, which is sort of lots of people talking about that at the moment. And I discussed this yesterday, how this road is under some kind of fire control from the Russians, but the Ukrainians hold Vuhledar and it has an elevated position, which means that Avdivka, even if the Russians take Avdivka entirely, they're going to be under a lot of pressure from snipers, artillery, mortars, and everything from Vuhledar, and these guys are being reinforced. But there is Russian pressure coming back. So there was a counterattack by the Ukrainians. Now there's pressure backwards from the Russians. However, if we just go a little bit further southeast, there is Volnovakha. So Volnovakha was hit yesterday. Let's see a bit of information about this. So, Geopolitical Hub says there are reports of a Ukrainian strike near Volnovakha targeting a hotel where Kadyrovites. So, this is Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, has Chechen troops there, and there are some of these guys residing in Volnovakha. Here it says about 10 pieces of military equipment were destroyed in Volnovakha, Donetsk Oblast, as a result of projectile hitting the hotel. And again, occupied Volnovakha, the Tamar Hotel on the Mariupol Donetsk highway where the Kadyrovs were based was hit. About 10 units of military equipment were neutralized. So big explosions there. And that will obviously affect, that's exactly what Ukrainians would want, because that will then affect provision of reinforcements and equipment to the Russians fighting around here. I would say this is an area where you want HIMARS and grads to be used to great effect. Because this is all pretty hot there at the moment. Okay, as we move along, there is some sort of minor stuff going on towards Zaporizhzhia at the moment, but not enough for me to report on. I've changed my lines in the northern area of the Kherson region. I had it all over the shop. Basically, there's just no information coming out there that tells you definitively where forces are. So I've basically redrawn the Ukrainians to be broadly back here and the Russians to be broadly along here. I did have Ukrainians coming down here and I had Russians going up there. I just think it's all one big grey zone. This we know there was a geolocation. So Russians were shelling west of Ishchenka. So this is another good. So Blazinka is a pretty decent geolocator. In fact, that's the last one I just showed you. Up near Avdivka was this guy doing that geolocation as well. He's geolocated shelling of Russian positions, which means Russians must, control this area near Ishchenka. So that's why I've kept that in Russian control there. Even though we had previous claims that was under Ukrainian control. Anyway, just not a lot of information coming out of Kherson. So there you go. I will give you, let's see if that's all. There was something to say about Kherson. So the forced evacuation of civilians from settlements in the temporarily occupied territories of the Kherson Oblast continues. In particular, the occupiers are taking people away by bus from the settlement of Velika Lepetaika. Departure by private transport is prohibited. So this is on the east bank, the left bank of the Dnieper River. which is interesting. They are evacuating civilians away from there. They just seem to be making this whole area a a, a military battle zone, ready for a forthcoming attack, which has been promised by the Ukrainians, but we're still waiting to see how that develops. Anyway, thank you so much for checking this out. Hopefully more information will be forthcoming throughout the day, and I'll let you know. But please check out my Ukraine War Update Extra video later. Please like, subscribe, share, do all those lovely things that you always do. You're such great supporters of the channel. Really appreciate that. You can also pop along to uasupporter.com/ATP. The /ATP is important because that gets me a tiny bit of commission for anything you buy. And you can buy loads of stuff. Hey, you can even buy flags if you want to show your support for Ukraine, or indeed America or Australia, or American Ukraine, or Canada and Ukraine, or show your support for trees and foliage. Thank you. You take care. All the best. Speak to you later.